Their card already covered the cake last week, the waiter whispered, right after James dumped the bill in front of me, loud enough for Evan to hear. I'd just been humiliated in front of my grandson by my own daughter and her smug husband. But then Sarah texted me saying since I was sitting on money, I should send them $2,500 a month for sports and tutoring. That's when I knew this wasn't just a joke. It was a setup, a test, and they thought I'd roll over. But they forgot what Ellen and I locked in our trust years ago. At Evan's birthday, they made me pay for cake, but the waiter announced something they didn't expect. Now, I've got 21 days and receipts that don't lie. My name is Harold Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Every morning I sit at my kitchen table with coffee that tastes like sawdust, balancing checkbooks while my old box fan whirs in the corner. My grandson Evan, my daughter Sarah's 12-year-old boy, brings light to my Sundays since my wife Ellen passed. These days, my daughter Sarah and her husband James have been making pointed comments about my savings at family gatherings. Yesterday, James's joke about old money at church made my jaw clench. What they don't know is that Ellen and I prepared for this years ago. Every trust clause and estate paper sits organized in my locked desk drawer. My late wife always said family comes first, but she also taught me to keep my guard up. But let me start from the beginning. I should have known something was off when Sarah called about Evan's birthday dinner. "Dad, we've got everything covered," she said, her voice honeyed with assurance. "Just bring yourself and maybe a small gift. We want to keep things simple." She repeated it again when I picked them up in my Buick, James nodding, along from the back seat, Evan bouncing with 12-year-old excitement between them. You ever get that feeling in your gut that something isn't right? Like when you're about to cut wood and the saw blade feels loose? That's how I felt pulling into Giovanni's parking lot, but I pushed it down. This was Evan's night. The restaurant buzzed with Saturday crowds, and the hostess led us through tables of chattering families to a corner booth. Candle smoke curled up from centerpieces, and the warm air carried garlic and herbs from the kitchen. Evan sat up straight, trying to look grown up in his new button-down shirt, but I caught him sneaking peeks at the dessert cart rolling past. "How's the hardware store doing without you, Harold?" James asked, unfolding his napkin. "Must be strange seeing someone else behind your old counter." "Ray's doing fine," I said, remembering my business partner's handshake when I sold him my share. 40 years was enough for me." Sarah touched my arm. "And now you can relax, Dad. Enjoy your retirement." I let myself ease into the evening as plates of pasta arrived. The conversation flowed, and Evan's face lit up when he talked about his science project. Made me think of Ellen. She would have loved hearing him explain everything with such enthusiasm. Then came the moment, the wait staff gathering, the lights dimming. They wheeled out a chocolate cake with 12 flickering candles, must have been 3 tiers high, covered in that fancy fondant work Sarah always insisted on. Phones came out for pictures, and Evan's grin nearly split his face while we sang. I accepted a modest slice, tasting buttercream and remembering Ellen's homemade cakes. They weren't as fancy, but they were made with love. Just as I was savoring that memory, James caught the server's eye. The leather billfold landed in front of me with a soft thud. "Grandpa's got it covered, right?" James's voice carried just enough for nearby tables to hear. A few chuckles rippled through our group. Sarah's friends from church, some cousins. They weren't kind laughs. My neck grew hot. I looked at Evan, but he was staring at his empty plate, shoulders hunched. The boy knew something wasn't right, and that cut deeper than any bill could. You know what 40 years of running a business teaches you? Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. I reached for my wallet, careful to keep my hands steady despite the anger tightening my chest. The receipt showed a figure that would have bought a month's groceries, but I signed it without comment. Dignity, I reminded myself, was worth more than dollars. As I slid the leather folder back across the white tablecloth, the waiter couldn't have been more than 20. Hesitated. He glanced at James, then leaned close to my ear. "Sir," he whispered, "I thought you should know. Their card already covered the cake deposit last week." The words hit like a hammer to glass. I felt the pieces starting to crack, but I held them together. Not here, not now, not in front of Evan. My hand froze on the pen, the signature suddenly looking wrong, too shaky, like I'd forgotten how to write my own name. The waiter's words echoed in my head. They'd already paid for the cake. The whole setup hit me like a sucker punch, leaving me winded but forcing a smile. You know that moment when you realize you've been played? When all those little hints click together like tumblers in a lock? I'd been in business long enough to recognize a setup, but this one came gift-wrapped in birthday paper and tied with family strings. "Thanks for dinner, Dad," Sarah chirped, gathering her purse. Behind her, James's laugh carried across the restaurant, that sharp bark that always reminded me of a car salesman closing a deal. I pushed myself up from the table, legs steadier than they had any right to be. "Happy birthday, buddy," I managed to tell Evan, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That hurt worse than the bill. The boy had his grandmother's sense of right and wrong. He knew what had happened wasn't fair. Outside, the night air hit me like a splash of cold water. Rain was coming. I could smell it in the wind that rustled through the restaurant's awning. Petrichor, Ellen would have called it. She loved those fancy words for simple things. The memory of her steadied me like it always did. The drive home was quiet enough to hear thoughts rattle. Sarah and James had taken their own car, thank God, but Evan's silence from the restaurant kept jabbing at me like a splinter under the skin. That boy shouldn't have had to watch his grandfather get played for a fool. Remember what I said about respecting receipts? Well, this one burned a hole in my pocket all the way home. The minute I walked through my front door, I pulled it out and laid it on the kitchen table, right next to the checkbook Ellen had always kept so meticulously. The paper seemed to mock me under the yellow light of my old overhead lamp. My hands shook, not from age but from something deeper. Anger, sure, shame, that too. But mostly it was disappointment. Not in them, I was past that, but in myself for not seeing it coming. All those little comments about my retirement nest egg and how I should be sharing the wealth should have been warning enough. You want to know the worst part? I could hear Ellen's voice in my head, clear as morning. Numbers don't lie, Harold. People do, but numbers. They'll always tell you the truth if you know how to read them. I grabbed the edge of the table, feeling the solid oak under my fingers. The same table where I'd taught Sarah to do her homework, where Ellen and I had planned our retirement, where I still sorted my morning mail. 40 years of running Whitaker Hardware had taught me one thing. Verify first, confront later. Accusations without proof are just hot air, and I wasn't about to blow smoke. Pulling out my phone, one of those simple flip models that drove Sarah crazy, I set the alarm for 8 a.m. First thing tomorrow, I'd call Giovanni's and ask for Marcus, the manager. I'd known him for years. He'd bought his first tool set from my store when he was just starting out. He'd understand why I needed to see the itemized records, maybe even the payment identifiers. My carpenter's fingers, still steady after all these years, wrote the number down on a notepad. Giovanni's 8 a.m. Marcus. Below it I added, request records, cake deposit. The receipt sat there, patient as paper can be, while questions stacked up like lumber in my mind. If Marcus came through with those records by noon tomorrow, what would they show? Whose card had really paid for that cake? And more importantly, what else had they been planning behind my back? I looked at Ellen's photo, on the wall, the one from our 40th anniversary, her smile bright as sunrise. "Well, old girl," I said to the quiet room, "looks like we've got some accounting to do. Sharp at 8, clear as numbers. Ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting for something?" That night crawled by like molasses in January. I was up before my alarm, sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, when the clock finally hit 8. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed Giovanni's. 3 rings, then Marcus's familiar voice. "Giovanni's restaurant, Marcus speaking." "Marcus? Harold Whitaker here." "Mr. Whitaker, how was the birthday dinner?" His tone changed when I didn't answer right away. "Something wrong?" I kept my voice steady the way I used to when handling difficult customers. "Need a favor, Marcus. Could you pull up last night's records? I'm looking for details on the cake payment." There was a pause, some clicking. "Sure thing, Mr. Whitaker, give me a minute." More clicking. "Yeah, here it is. Looks like..." "Huh? That's odd." My grip tightened on the phone. "What's odd?" "Well, there's a prepayment from yesterday morning. Credit card ending in 4382. They left a note for the server. Settle bill at table." He cleared his throat. "Want me to email you the receipt?" That number, 4382. Sarah's card, the one she'd gotten when James made partner at his firm. They'd waved it around enough times for me to remember. "Please," I said, and gave him my email address. "Marcus, I appreciate this." No problem, Mr. Whitaker. Still got that socket set I bought from you 20 years ago. The printer hummed to life moments later, spitting out 2 copies. Black and white, but the truth was clear enough. Sarah's card, time-stamped 10:47 a.m. yesterday. The note to the server might as well have been written in neon. Settle bill at table. You know that feeling when you're looking at something you wish wasn't true, like finding rot in your favorite wooden chair? My stomach twisted as I remembered Evan's face, how he couldn't look at me. The boy knew, he must have known what they were planning. I picked up the phone again, hit Sarah's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding cheerful. Too cheerful. Dad, we were just talking about what a nice evening. Sarah, I cut in. Want to explain why you prepaid for the cake yesterday morning? A pause, then a laugh that didn't reach her words. Oh, that? Just a little misunderstanding with the restaurant. Besides, you always like to pay, Dad. You're so generous that way. My knuckles went white around the phone. Don't do that, Sarah. Don't twist this around. Nobody's twisting anything, she said, her voice taking on that professional tone she used with difficult clients. You're making something out of nothing. Let me talk to Evan. He's busy with homework. Sarah, look, Dad, I've got to go. We'll talk later, okay? The line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone when it buzzed with a text. From Sarah. Since you're sitting on money anyway, you should start contributing monthly for Evan's activities. He's getting older. Needs more opportunities. Before I could process that, another message popped up. $12,500 a month would help cover his sports, tutoring, and summer programs. $2,500 monthly. The number hit me like a physical blow. Sure, I had savings, careful, methodical savings from 40 years of honest work, but that kind of drain would bleed my accounts dry within a few years. I looked at the printed receipts again, then at Ellen's old filing cabinet in the corner. She'd taught me well, when people show their hand, you answer with paperwork. I reached for the phone one more time, not to argue with Sarah, but to make a different call altogether. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about respect, about truth, about the kind of legacy I wanted to leave Evan. And sometimes the only way to protect what matters is to dig in your heels and fight back, with documentation, with facts, with the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing you're right. The kitchen felt colder than usual that morning as I spread the bills across the table. Electric, property tax, insurance, the usual suspects that show up like clockwork. You ever notice how numbers have a way of cutting through nonsense? They don't care about feelings or family drama. They just sit there, black and white, telling you exactly where you stand. I pulled out my checkbook and calculator, the old-fashioned kind with actual buttons. Ellen used to tease me about not switching to phone apps, but there's something solid about feeling those keys under your fingers. $2,500 a month, $30,000 a year. The calculator seemed to mock me as I punched in the figures. My pension from the hardware store was decent enough for one person living carefully. Add in the Social Security and I got by, just fine. Even had enough to spoil Evan on birthdays and Christmas. But this would drain my savings account in 3 years, maybe 4, if I cut back on everything else. And that medical cushion I'd built up? Gone faster than sawdust in a windstorm. The morning sun caught the edge of my reading glasses as I leaned back, feeling that hollow ache in my chest that comes with being cornered. You know what I mean? That sensation of walls closing, of dignity slipping through your fingers like water. Here I was, 75 years old, being treated like some community piggy bank by the same daughter I'd taught to count change in my store. The smell of coffee didn't help much, reminded me too much of those early mornings with Ellen, planning our future, making sure everything was set up right for Sarah and, eventually, Evan. I could almost hear Ellen's voice. Harold, we didn't build all this just to have it stripped away. Remember the trust? My hands weren't quite steady as I crossed to the old desk in the corner. Second drawer down, behind the hardware catalogs I couldn't bring myself to throw away. There it was, Ellen's folder, labeled in her precise handwriting, Trust, Education, Emergency. The paper inside still held a trace of her perfume, or maybe that was just my imagination playing tricks. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. 3 rings. Ray speaking. Ray. It's Harold. Got time for coffee? A pause. Then that familiar gruff chuckle. For you. Always. Something wrong? Need your eyes on some numbers. I fingered the edge of Ellen's folder. And maybe your memory about certain arrangements we made back when. Ah, just that one syllable. But Ray understood. He'd been there through everything. 40 years of inventory counts, tax, seasons, and careful planning. Give me an hour, I'll bring donuts. Thanks, Ray. I hesitated. And Ray, bring that sharp mind of yours. I think I'm going to need it. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, writing questions for Thomas, our family attorney. Who exactly controlled the trust accounts now? What were the conditions for changes? When was the last time anyone had accessed the documents? The questions filled. One page, then another. Each one felt like a stone in my stomach, but I kept writing. Sometimes the only way forward is through the hard questions. Night had crept in while I worked. When I finally locked Ellen's folder away, the kitchen window had turned into a mirror. The man staring back at me looked tired, older than I felt inside. But his eyes, my eyes, held something steady, something that remembered 40 years of standing behind that hardware store counter, meeting every obligation, keeping every promise. The phone rang, startling me in the darkness. Ray's number. Harold? His voice had that tone, the one he used when inventory numbers didn't match. I've been making some calls. There's something you need to see at the lawyer's tomorrow. My hand tightened on the receiver. What kind of something, Ray? The kind that can't wait. Meet me at Thomas's office at 9? I'll be there. I set the phone down slowly, looking again at that reflection in the dark window. The bills still lay scattered on the table behind me, but they seemed less important now. Something bigger was moving in the shadows of all this, and I had a feeling tomorrow would show me exactly what. The next morning hit me like a sledgehammer to the ribs. You ever have one of those days where you know everything's about to change? Ray was already waiting outside Thomas's law office when I pulled up, 2 coffee cups steaming in his hands. Some friendships don't need words. 40 years of trading inventory sheets and life stories builds its own language. Brought your reading glasses? Ray handed me a cup, his eyes crinkling behind wire frames that matched my own. And Ellen's folder. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of those carefully preserved papers. Though I'm starting to wonder if I'm being paranoid about all this. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the coffee settling wrong in my stomach, or maybe it was the way Ray kept checking his watch. The familiar ding of the 5th floor brought back memories of sitting here with Ellen, planning everything out just so. The smell of leather chairs and lemon polish hadn't changed a bit. Thomas's secretary, Martha, been there longer than the furniture, waved us straight in. He's expecting you both. The office looked exactly as it had when Ellen and I drafted those trust documents years ago. Same dark wood desk, same wall of law books, same view of the downtown streets where I'd once walked Ellen home from our first date. Thomas stood up to greet us, his handshake firm despite the silver at his temples. Harold, Ray. He gestured to the chairs. Martha mentioned you had some concerns about the trust arrangements. I pulled out Ellen's folder, laying it carefully on his desk. Need to confirm a few things, Thomas, starting with who controls what. Ray set down his coffee and leaned forward. And we brought some interesting documentation from a recent incident. I slid the restaurant receipts across the desk, watching Thomas's eyebrows rise as he read them. But that could wait. First, I needed to know where I stood. The trust clauses, I said. They still protect Evan's education fund and my independence. Thomas opened Ellen's folder, scanning the familiar pages with practiced eyes. His nod came quick and sure. These are rock solid, Harold. Ellen knew exactly what she wanted to protect. He tapped a particular paragraph. Your autonomy over personal accounts is explicitly preserved, and Evan's education fund is ironclad unless both trustees agree to changes. The tension in my shoulders eased a fraction. From the corner of my eye, I caught Ray's approving nod. For a moment, I could almost smell Ellen's perfume, feel her steady presence beside me. She'd always said planning beats panic. Any recent activity? Ray's question cut through my relief. Filings, inquiries, amendments. Thomas turned to his computer, fingers clicking across keys. Let me check the docket. There might be... He stopped mid-sentence, frowning, at the screen. You know that moment when you can feel bad news coming? When the air gets thick and your coffee turns to acid in your stomach? What is it? My voice sounded strange in my ears. Thomas cleared his throat. There's a petition, filed last week by Sarah, your daughter. He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. She's requesting oversight of the trust be transferred to her. The room tilted sideways. All that relief from moments. Cargo, gone like smoke in a storm. My fingers found the armrest, gripping hard enough to whiten my knuckles. A petition? Ray's voice seemed to come from far away. On what grounds? Thomas was still reading, his frown deepening. She's citing concerns about financial decision-making capacity, claims there are signs of deterioration in judgment. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. When? I'm sorry? The hearing. I forced the words out. When's the hearing? Thomas clicked through another screen, and I watched his face tell me the news before his words did. 3 weeks from today, 9 a.m., family court. 3 weeks. 21 days to stop my own daughter from taking everything Ellen and I had built to protect our grandson's future. 21 days before I could lose control of every dime I'd earned in 40 years of honest work. 3 weeks. My hands were steady on the armrest now, mind clicking into gear like an old cash register. Thursday the 23rd, I said, pulling out my pocket calendar. 9 a.m. That's not much time, Ray muttered, but I was already counting days in my head. 21 days. I looked at Thomas. What do we need? He pulled a yellow legal pad closer. First, certified copies of the trust documents. I'll handle that today. His pen scratched against paper. We'll need comprehensive bank statements, at least the past 2 years, showing consistent, responsible management of both accounts. Ray leaned forward. And that restaurant setup. We can use that to show who's really being irresponsible here. The waiter's whispered warning echoed in my head. I pulled out the itemized bill, smoothing it on Thomas's desk. Manager's name is David Chen. Timestamp shows the prepayment at 10:47 that morning, made on Sarah's card. Thomas noted the details. We may need testimony about the settle-at-table instruction. I can issue a subpoena if Mr. Chen or the waiter won't cooperate voluntarily. The waiter's name was Marcus, I said, remembering his concerned expression. Young guy, probably college-age, dark hair, glasses. Ray pulled out his own notebook. I'll handle the restaurant angle. Still know half the business owners downtown. Somebody'll have Marcus's contact information. The familiar rhythm of planning settled my nerves. This was just inventory management with higher stakes. Track everything, document the details, maintain order. Ellen's voice whispered in my memory. Lists beat chaos, Harry. Always. We should set a schedule, I said, opening my calendar again. Morning work blocks for gathering documents and making calls. Afternoons for rest. Need to be sharp for the hearing. Thomas nodded approvingly. Good thinking. Court days can be long. We'll need you focused. I'll come by every morning, Ray offered. 2 sets of eyes catch more details. We spent the next half hour mapping out daily tasks. Thomas would handle the legal paperwork. Ray would track down our restaurant witnesses. I'd compile the financial records, every statement, every receipt, that proved I hadn't lost my grip on reality or responsibility. One more thing, Thomas said, closing his notepad. Until the hearing, any communication with Sarah should go through my office. No direct contact, no matter what she sends you. The sun was almost accusatory when we stepped outside, bright enough to make me squint. Ray paused at his car, keys in hand. We'll beat this, Harry. I stared down at the sidewalk, feeling the weight of what we were facing. You know what keeps hitting me? Not the money. Not even Sarah's betrayal. I looked up at my old friend. It's Evan. If I lose this, if she takes control, what's that boy going to think of his grandfather? That I couldn't even manage my own affairs? Stop that, Ray said firmly. Evan knows you. 40 years running the store, never a missed payment, never a bounced check. Hell, you tracked inventory down to the last washer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. But the area code matched the restaurant. I showed it to Ray. Right on time, he said. Ready to start building our case? I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button, remembering Ellen's other favorite saying, dignity isn't just about pride, Harry. Sometimes it's about standing your ground. Hello? I kept my voice neutral, professional, the same tone I'd used for 40 years of vendor calls. Mr. Whitaker? David Chen from Riverside Restaurant. The manager's voice was crisp, businesslike. I received a message about the birthday party last Thursday. Yes, thank you for calling back. I moved away from Ray's car, pacing slowly. I understand one of your servers, Marcus, might have information relevant to a legal matter. There was a slight pause. Marcus mentioned the situation. He's willing to cooperate if formally requested. Said something felt off that night. My hand tightened on the phone. Would he testify if subpoenaed? He would. Look, Mr. Whitaker. Chen's voice softened slightly. I've run this place 15 years. Never seen anything quite like that setup. We'll provide whatever documentation you need. After getting Marcus's shift details and POS identifiers for the subpoena, I thanked Chen and hung up. Ray was already on his phone, calling Thomas with the information. Conference rooms reserved for us all. Afternoon, Ray said after ending his call. Time to build that evidence binder. The familiar leather chair in Thomas's conference room squeaked as I settled in. Ray spread file folders across the polished table while I pulled out my own stack of documents. The sound of papers shuffling reminded me of inventory nights at the store, Ellen bringing coffee while we balanced the books. Start with the restaurant evidence, Ray suggested, opening a fresh 3-ring binder. Establish the pattern. I laid out the prepayment receipt, then the final bill with my signature. The 2 documents side by side told their own story. Ray added clear plastic sleeves, protecting each piece of evidence. Now the texts, he said. My phone held weeks of increasing demands. Each message about contributing felt like a small knife now. We printed them all, noting dates and times. The amount Sarah wanted would have bled my savings dry within a year. Got something, Ray murmured, checking his email. Thomas pulled Marcus's shift log and transaction records. Shows the exact minute Sarah left those settle at table instructions. The afternoon sun slanted through Venetian blinds as we worked. Occasionally, Ray's phone buzzed with updates from Thomas or messages from his contacts downtown. Each time, another piece clicked into place. Did you hear what Mrs. Peterson said at church? I asked suddenly, pausing over a bank statement. About the nice party last week. Her tone was odd. Ray's hands stilled. Sarah's been talking, probably trying to get ahead of this, paint her own picture. The thought made my stomach clench. I'd seen it happening. Sideways glances at the grocery store, conversations that stopped when I approached. Small-town whispers could cut deep. Add this, I said, pulling out a letter I'd picked up that morning. From George Turner, the church treasurer. 20 years I've handled the weekly collections. Never a penny out of place. Ray read it quickly, nodding. Good. Shows community standing, financial responsibility. We worked until sunset, my hands aching from sorting papers. The binder grew thick with evidence, 40 years of balanced ledgers, trust documents, bank statements showing careful management. Each page felt like a brick in a wall I was building against Sarah's claims, but as the room darkened and Ray clicked on the desk lamp, I felt the weight of what was coming. 3 weeks suddenly seemed very short. The question I'd been avoiding rose up like bile. Ray? My voice sounded old in the quiet room. He looked up from labeling a tab. What if I'm not strong enough? The words came out barely above a whisper. To face them in court. To fight my own daughter. Ray set down his pen and met my eyes. His steady look held no answer. Just the weight of 40 years of friendship and the question hanging between us in the gathering dark. The house felt different that night. Maybe it was the way shadows stretched across the kitchen floor, or how the old wall clock's ticking seemed amplified in the quiet. I'd spent countless evenings alone since Ellen passed, but this one had weight to it. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. You know that feeling when you're about to do something big, and your mind won't settle. That was me, pacing between rooms, straightening pictures that didn't need straightening. I ended up at my desk around 9, pulling out the good stationery Ellen had always insisted we keep. The kind with the subtle blue lines that guide you straight, but disappear when you write. My hand shook slightly as I dated the top. Dear Evan, there are some things a 12-year-old shouldn't have to understand, but tomorrow might force your hand. Whatever happens in court, I need you to know this. I love you. That won't change. Your mom, my daughter, is still your mom, and she loves you too. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes trying to protect what they think matters most. I stopped there, tapping the pen against the desk. The urge to explain more, to justify or defend, pressed against my chest. But no, keeping it simple was right. Evan was smart. He'd figure things out on his own someday. The kitchen clock struck 10. Each chime felt like a weight dropping onto my shoulders. Maybe Sarah was right. Wouldn't it be easier to just let her handle things? Sign over control. Keep the peace. See Evan without all this mess? The thought tasted like surrender in my mouth. I reached for Ellen's folder again, the one I'd checked 100 times already. Her signatures flowed across each page, steady and sure. My thumb traced the curves of her name, and suddenly I could smell her perfume, that light floral scent she only wore to important meetings. "What would you say tonight, Elle?" I whispered to the empty room. The answer came in memory, her voice firm after that contractor tried to cheat us in '82. "Sometimes peace costs too much, Harry." The phone's ring cut through my thoughts like a knife. I grabbed it quickly, seeing Thomas's number. "Harold, good news. Marcus was served the subpoena an hour ago. He's confirmed for 9 a.m. sharp, bringing the POS records and his written statement." My breath whooshed out. "He's definitely coming. Already spoke with him myself. He remembers everything. The prepayment instructions, Sarah's specific words, your reaction, Chen's. Backing him up with the transaction logs." Something hot and unexpected pressed behind my eyes. I blinked hard, surprised by tears I hadn't felt building. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything. Get some sleep, Harold. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." After hanging up, I walked to the front door where my charcoal suit hung ready. The evidence binder sat on the entry table beneath it, thick with truth. I adjusted both slightly, then stopped myself. Ellen used to tease me about fussing over details when I was nervous. Back upstairs, I paused at the bedroom dresser where her photo stood. She was laughing in it, caught mid-gesture while explaining something, probably telling me I was being stubborn about something or other. "I'll protect what matters, Elle," I promised her image softly. "Evan's future, the independence we built, the dignity you taught me to keep." The alarm was set for 6, earlier than needed, but I knew sleep wouldn't come easy. Lying in bed, I watched headlights occasionally sweep across the ceiling, each one marking time's slow crawl toward morning. Here's something funny about age. You spend decades learning patience, only to find yourself counting minutes like a kid before Christmas. Except this time, Santa wasn't coming. Just a judge, a daughter I barely recognized, and a chance to prove that some things are worth fighting for. I turned onto my side, Ellen's side of the bed, still empty after all these years. Dawn felt a lifetime away, but at least now I knew I wouldn't face it alone. Somewhere across town, a young waiter named Marcus was probably setting his own alarm, ready to speak truth into a courtroom that needed to hear it. You ever notice how courthouse steps feel steeper in the morning, like they're testing your resolve with each rise? Ray's shoulder bumped mine as we climbed, steady as always. The leather binder under my arm felt heavier than its contents should allow. Funny how truth can weigh so much. "Ready?" Ray asked, holding the heavy door. I nodded, though my throat had gone desert dry. The security line moved with that particular government efficiency that makes minutes feel like hours. I kept touching my jacket pocket, where Ellen's reading glasses sat folded, a habit she'd have rolled her eyes at. But some rituals comfort more than they make sense. The courtroom maple panels gleamed like honey in the morning light. Sarah and her lawyer were already seated, heads bent over papers. She didn't look up when we entered, but I caught the slight stiffening of her shoulders. Remember when she was 6, refusing to admit she'd drawn on the wallpaper? Same tension, different stakes. All rise. The judge entered, a woman about Sarah's age with steel-rimmed glasses and quick eyes. Looking at her made me think of all the receipts I'd kept, wondering if they'd speak clearly enough. Sarah's attorney rose first, Mr. Patterson, though I remembered him as Tommy from Little League days. Funny how time changes things. His voice filled the room with practiced concern. "Your Honor, we're here out of deep worry for Harold Whitaker's increasing isolation and financial secretiveness. Recent incidents suggest declining judgment. I counted breaths like Ellen taught me during her chemo treatments. 1, 2, 3. Refuses to discuss his finances with family, makes impulsive decisions. 4, 5, 6. Demonstrated public pettiness at his own grandson's birthday celebration." My fingers found Ellen's glasses again. 7, 8. Clearly showing he's no longer suitable to manage substantial funds that directly impact his grandson's future. 9, 10. The judge's pen moved steadily. her expression unchanged. "Mr. Whitaker, please approach." Standing felt like pushing against gravity itself, but Ray's slight nod steadied me. The podium's wood was cool under my palms. "Your Honor, I've managed my hardware store's books for 40 years, and my household's for 55. Every month I reconcile accounts to the penny. I can show you—" I patted the binder, drawing comfort from its solid presence. "My withdrawal patterns, which haven't changed in 10 years. Evans College Fund grows monthly, untouched except for the scheduled deposits." I pulled out the first statement summary, clean columns marching down the page. The bailiff carried it to the bench. "Conservative investments," I continued, finding my rhythm in the familiar territory of numbers. "CDs laddered for optimal returns. Monthly expenses tracked and projected." Another page went forward. "I've never missed a bill or bounced a check." The judge studied each document, her expression thawing slightly, but not completely. She looked up over those steel rims. "Mr. Whitaker, your financial records appear meticulous. However, your daughter's petition cites concerning behavior, specifically at a recent birthday celebration. Do you have any documentation regarding claims of public humiliation and misrepresentation by the petitioner?" There it was, the question everything hinged on. My heart thumped hard against my ribs as I glanced toward the gallery. Marcus sat quietly in the third row, straight-backed in his borrowed suit. Poor kid, probably never expected to spend his morning off in court, but there he was, solid as a foundation wall. I turned back to the judge, fingers finding the red tab labeled "Birthday" in Ellen's old label maker font. The pages beneath it held everything: the prepayment receipt, the time-stamped bill, Marcus's written statement, the manager's transaction logs. Sarah finally looked at me then, really looked, as I pulled out the first document. Her face went pale as typing paper when she recognized the restaurant's logo. For just a second, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to climb into my lap after skinning her knee, trusting me to make things right. The bailiff stepped forward, hand extended for the papers that would change everything. The courtroom had gone silent as a church at midnight, waiting. Sarah's eyes dropped to her lap. I held the proof of her betrayal, feeling its weight one last time before letting go. Marcus stood, right hand raised. The fluorescent lights caught the small tremor in his fingers. Probably his first time testifying. Can't blame him, even. After 40 years of church treasurer reports, my own hands still shook during presentations. "Please state your name and occupation," the clerk intoned. "Marcus Chen. I'm a server at Marinelli's restaurant on 5th Street. And you were working the evening of May 15th. Our attorney's voice was gentle but firm. "Yes, ma'am, I was assigned to the private dining room for a birthday party. Could you describe what happened regarding the payment?" "Arrangements." Marcus squared his shoulders. "That morning around 10 a.m. a woman called to prepay for a special cake. When I checked in with my manager about the order, there was a note attached to the POS receipt. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit C, the point-of-sale log from Marinelli's restaurant." Our attorney handed a document to the bailiff. Sarah's knee started bouncing under the table, a nervous tell since grade school, her lawyer's pen tapped faster against his legal pad. "Mr. Chen, please read the payment details and attach note." Marcus cleared his throat. "Cake charge, 175 zeros. Paid via Visa card ending 4892. Name, Sarah Whitaker. Staff note, present full bill to Grandpa." The gallery's collective gasp felt like a wave breaking. A woman 2 rows back actually covered her mouth. I kept my hands folded in my lap, steady as railway ties, while Sarah's face went from pink to white. "And what happened when you brought the bill to the table?" Mr. Whitaker's son-in-law caught my eye and nodded. He'd been watching for me. When I set down the leather folder, he announced that Grandpa would cover it. Made it sound like they hadn't discussed payment at all. The judge's glasses came off, never a good sign for the party being scrutinized. "Ms. Whitaker, am I understanding correctly that you deliberately orchestrated a public scene to embarrass your father?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed. Her lawyer started to rise, but the judge's hand cut him off. "And you did this at your own son's birthday celebration?" The courtroom had gone so quiet you could hear the wall clock ticking. Made me think of my old store, the way silence would fall just before a summer storm broke. "Your Honor," Sarah's lawyer tried again. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about—" "The receipt and note are quite clear, Counselor." The judge's tone could have frozen coffee, What I'm trying to understand is how your client thought this behavior would support her petition for financial oversight. A few people in the gallery exchanged knowing looks. Mrs. Peterson from church shook her head slowly. Word would be all over town by dinner. Not that I wanted that exactly, but truth has a way of finding daylight. Counsel. Approach. As the lawyers moved to the bench, Ray's hand found my shoulder. We'd been friends since his first day stocking shelves at my store 43 years ago. He knew what this moment cost me. The sidebar whispers grew sharp enough that fragments carried sanctions, court costs, ethical concerns. Sarah stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The same expression she wore at 16 when caught sneaking out. But we were far past simple grounding now. This was about trust broken in front of witnesses, about using my grandson's birthday as a trap. The judge's gavel crack startled everyone upright. Before ruling on the petition itself, let me be clear about the evidence presented. We have documented proof of the petitioner attempting to manipulate this court through manufactured incidents. Mr. Chen's testimony and the restaurant records show premeditation in creating a false narrative about the respondent's character. She paused, looking directly at Sarah. That this was done at a child's birthday party, using a minor as an unwitting participant in your scheme, is particularly troubling. I thought of Evan's downturned eyes that night, the shame he shouldn't have had to carry. The memory still burned, but now it was burning in the right direction, toward justice instead of humiliation. The gallery leaned forward as the judge lifted another paper, the moment balanced like a plumb line, ready to drop true. The gavel cracked again. Petition denied. The court finds no evidence supporting the need for financial oversight. To the contrary, Mr. Whitaker has demonstrated consistent, responsible management of all accounts in question. My shoulders dropped an inch. The tight band that had been squeezing my chest for 3 weeks finally loosened. Furthermore, the judge continued, adjusting her glasses, given the documented attempt to manufacture evidence through the birthday incident, this court finds the petition was filed in bad faith. All court costs will be assessed to the petitioner, including fees for the expedited subpoena and witness appearance. Sarah's lawyer started scribbling numbers. I didn't need to see his math. I knew exactly what emergency filing, fees and rush service cost these days. The total would sting. We're adjourned. The gavel fell one last time. The gallery rustled to life. I stayed seated while Sarah gathered her purse and practically ran from the courtroom, her lawyer trailing behind. Funny how fast someone can move when reality's chasing them. Ray helped me collect our papers. Need a minute? I shook my head. Let's get some air. The courthouse hallway was already humming with whispers. Mrs. Peterson from the church council stood with her friend Annie, who ran the school parent committee. Their conversation stopped dead when they saw me. Annie touched my arm as I passed. Harold, we had no idea. She glanced toward the courtroom doors. The way Sarah described things. It's done now, I said quietly. More faces I recognized. Bob from the hardware supplier meetings. Linda, who organized the school fundraisers. Mike, whose kid played baseball with Evan. Each one offered a small nod or gentle smile, the kind of silent support that speaks volumes in a small town. Ray and I were halfway to the parking lot when my phone buzzed. Evan's name lit up the screen. I answered, my throat tight. Hey, buddy. Are you okay, Grandpa? His voice was small, uncertain. The same question he'd asked that night at the restaurant, but different now. Cleaner. No shame hiding. In the corners. Better now, I told him. Everything's going to be just fine. Mum's really upset. I know, but sometimes being upset helps us learn. Yeah, a pause. Will I still see you on Sundays? Count on it. Nothing's changing there. I kept my voice steady. Your future's secure, Evan. That's what today was about. After we hung up, Ray drove me home. The house felt different somehow, lighter, like after a good spring cleaning. I set the empty evidence binder on the kitchen table, next to where Ellen's photo usually sat. The quiet settled around me, familiar but expectant. One chapter closed, another opening. The question now wasn't about protecting what we had. That battle was won. It was about building what came next, making sure Evan had a path that didn't depend on anyone's good graces or greedy impulses. I went to my desk and pulled out Ellen's folder. The scholarship section was near the back, crisp and clean like she'd filed it yesterday. We'd talked about this option years ago, setting up a dedicated trust that would grow steadily, untouchable until college. The papers felt right in my hands. Simple. Clear. A way to secure Evan's future that kept the money focused on education, not entertainment. No room for manipulation or monthly contributions. I spread the forms across the desk. Application for a new trust account, designation of beneficiary, scholarship criteria. Everything we needed to build something lasting, something that would make Ellen proud. Ray had left his card for a notary he trusted. Tomorrow would be soon enough to start the paperwork. Tonight was for sitting with the quiet victory, for remembering why we fight the hard battles. I picked up Ellen's photo from the mantel and set it beside the scholarship forms. Her smile hadn't changed in all these years. Steady, knowing, kind, but never soft when it came to doing right. "What do you think, old girl?" I asked the silence. "Time to build something new?" 8 sharp the next morning, I sat in attorney's wood-paneled office, watching him lay out the scholarship trust paperwork, with the same care I'd once used arranging display tools at the hardware store. Each document had its purpose, its place in the sequence. "Now, Harold," he said, adjusting his reading glasses, "this establishes a dedicated educational trust in Evan's name. The principle comes from your inheritance, modest but meaningful when properly managed." I nodded, thinking of Ellen's practicality. She'd have appreciated the structure, clear rules, regular progress checks, no room for games. "The disbursement criteria?" I asked, though I'd memorized them already. "Funds released quarterly, directly to the bursar's office, contingent on maintaining a B average and full-time enrollment." He tapped the relevant section. "Each semester requires a transcript submission and course schedule for the next term. Simple, transparent accountability. Just like Ellen would have wanted. Keep it clean, keep it focused on education. No chances for anyone to blur the lines between support and control. The trustee arrangement? You remain primary trustee until incapacity or death. Then it transfers to the bank's trust department, not family members." He gave me a knowing look. "They'll follow these guidelines to the letter." I picked up the pen, its weight familiar in my carpenter's hands. The signature lines waited, each one a brick in the wall between Evan's future and anyone's manipulation. "Initial here acknowledging the irrevocable nature of the trust," attorney said, marking each spot with a yellow tab. "And here for the academic performance requirements. Here for the quarterly disbursement schedule, and here confirming the institutional trustee succession." The pen scratched softly across the paper. Each mark felt like setting another stone in place, building something that would last. "Last signature here," he said, "establishing the trust effective today." I signed my full name, Harold James Whitaker, the way Ellen had taught me, decades ago. Precise, readable, certain. Attorney reached for his notary seal. "I'll have certified copies sent to the court record this afternoon. Would you like one sent anywhere else?" "Yes." I thought of the quiet support I'd seen in the courthouse hallway. "Please send one to Sandra Miller, the guidance counselor at Evans School. She should know this exists." The seal pressed into the paper with a solid thunk. Attorney handed me my copy, heavy cream-colored paper in a blue folder. "Well done, Harold." He stood, offering his hand. Ellen would approve. The morning sun had warmed the streets as I walked home, trust folder tucked under my arm. The same sidewalks where whispers had followed me last week now offered different greetings. Mrs. Peterson waved from her garden. Bob from the lumber yard touched his cap. No pity in their eyes anymore, just respect, the earned kind. My house. Key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, everything waited exactly as I'd left it. Ellen's wedding photo on the mantel, watching over the room like always. I lifted it carefully, wiping a fingerprint from the silver frame with my handkerchief. The trust deed came out of its folder clean and official, bearing all those careful signatures. I placed it on the mantel first, then set Ellen's photo beside it. Together they made a statement stronger than words. Proof that doing right still matters, that justice doesn't always need thunder and lightning. Standing back, I studied the pair. The documents that protected Evan's future. The woman who'd taught me about dignity. Sarah and her husband had lost twice now. First in court, then in the community's eyes. But that wasn't revenge. That was just truth finding its level, like water always does. I rested my hand on the cool mantel wood, feeling the house settle around me. Everything that mattered was secure now. The money would do what it was meant to do. The respect was back where it belonged. Ellen would have said it simpler. Respect isn't given. It's enforced.